So we're standing at the point where our running tunnels that have been driven from Limo Peninsula, where they meet the Farringdon East Ticket Hall site. So this is where our TBM Elizabeth has come to her resting place, and we're right below the Barbican London Underground station.
I got an email from Dave Toole at 4:30 on a Friday afternoon saying I was booked in for induction at 25 Canada Square, full stop. So I was a bit confused, so I saw Pat Lucy was walking by and I grabbed him. I said, "Pat, what's this?" And he goes, come into my office and we'll have a chat. We were doing some work on the tenders for the Olympic Games at the time, and I had a flight and the meeting was cancelled, but the flight was never cancelled. So he goes, "Yeah, that you still have that flight, so sure, go over to London. We've picked up this Crossrail project, contracts have been signed. Go over for a week and sure, see how you get on." 5 years later, I returned to my desk with all my stuff still in the drawers. It's like I just disappeared from the office.
For Ross Cullen, Group Chief Engineer at Sisk, the London Crossrail project was one of those rare opportunities that, if you're lucky, come along just once or twice in your career. And when they come along, you've got to make the most of them.
These big projects attract a lot of very experienced people, and I was largely very green at the time, so I took advantage of that and learnt as much as I could from as many people as possible, just by talking to them and picking their brains. And everyone has a contribution to make, so no matter how junior you are or how inexperienced you are, you have a contribution, and you put that with experienced people, and you develop ideas. That's part of the fun of it. That's what I like about engineering. It's working together to come up with a solution we can all get behind and build.
This is Inside Sisk, the podcast series where we take you inside the 160-year-old family-run construction company, John Sisk & Son, and introduce you to the people behind the projects. Projects like London Crossrail, and people like Ross Cullen. I'm your host, Patrick Haughey, and one of the things that struck me as I interviewed Sisk team members for this series was that time and time again, the conversation turned to solving problems and creating solutions. Not just the kind of engineering problems that Ross Cullen talked about just there, but also the problems that colleagues can face in their personal lives, which come in many shapes and sizes and require creative and sensitive solutions. In a few minutes' time, we will meet Rhys Watkins of Sisk Rail. Rhys has been through a lot in his own personal life, and that has made him very aware of the kind of challenges that his colleagues may be facing in their home lives that then has a natural impact on their work lives. Rhys has shown such a willingness and ability to help his colleagues through these challenges that it has become part of his role within the company. We'll hear how very shortly. But first, let's go back to Ross Cullen and the story about his time on London Crossrail. Ross mentioned that at times it felt like he was in the trenches with his team on this project. So I asked him to elaborate a little bit more on that.
Being in the trenches. We were literally in the trenches in Crossrail. Yeah, when we were tunnelling, we you'd start from A and you're going to B, but there's a lot of problems on the way and there's a lot of stations we had to get through. And, you would be approaching a station with a tunnelling machine and you don't have the solution of how do we actually receive the tunnelling machine into the cavern. And, we were developing that and we were arguing about it and discussing it or debating it or whatever you want to call it. But that machine was going to arrive at in this instance, Canary Wharf Station in 2 months' time, and we still didn't have the full solution worked out. So talk about being in the trenches. That was, you're on the train thinking about the problem, you're trying to sleep, you're waking up in the middle of the night thinking about the problem, thinking about how you're going to solve it. And everyone in the team is doing that, and you're sitting down having a cup of tea and you're still chatting about it, but then eventually a plan comes together, but there's nothing like a deadline to focus the mind. And sometimes a solution is better than no solution, and looking for that unicorn of the magic solution, you're not always going to get it. So you need something that's safe, reliable and works, and that everyone can agree on. So yeah, being in the trenches it's a kick. You get a kick out of it because you've got a problem that you can't solve. you get there together, you get through it. And when those TBMs arrived into the station, I remember, we must have been standing looking at a concrete wall for close on 14 hours waiting for the TBM to mine its way through the head wall, which was supposed to be a
TBM, be the tunnel boring machine.
So it was supposed to be like a 4 or 5 Newton concrete, and it was actually a 20 to 30 Newton concrete. So it took forever to get through. The miners are very worried about the bearing on the machine, because you can damage it, and if you damage it, then there's only one bearing. It's months of a delay. But when it eventually broke through, you could see all the steam rising up and the heat. But it was very satisfying. And as a team, all being there at 3 o'clock in the morning when it broke through, that's why we do it. As a group of individuals, really seeing this is the work we've put in, and we can see it being delivered, and getting that machine safely into the station was a bit of a kick. We did it 14 more times on the project, but it didn't get old. Every time you'd be worried, and you'd be thinking, is it going to be in the right spot? Because we'd gone 2 kilometres down a warren hole, and I think we were within a millimetre or two of where it needed to be on a 7-metre diameter machine. Limerick Tunnel was the first big project I worked on, and that was really, at the time I was told, it was this is the project of a lifetime. You get one of these in your career, make the most of it, and I did. But then I was fortunate enough to then have Crossrail come along, which was another one of these once in a lifetime projects. So to have had 2 of those in such a short space, I was extremely lucky.
Change here for the Piccadilly line.
My name's Rhys Watkins. I work for the Rail Business Unit. I'm currently a site manager, more of a site and support manager. Is that about it? Is that coming across okay? Am I too loud, or should I be louder? So I've got an annoying fly in here, so I'm trying not to... So I started with Sisk as a site manager approximately 7 years ago. I worked primarily on the western route, which takes me between Paddington and Penzance, which is quite a large area, as you can imagine. So back approximately 2.5 years ago, I was asked to attend Herne Bay, because we were breaking into the Kent area. So it was, can you please go to Herne Bay for a 3-month period? Which was not 3 months. It turned out to be a year. And then at the end of that year period, we sat down for a meeting. I noticed my name on the board, and I'm thinking, why is my name on the board? I meant to be going back to my line manager. So I said to my current boss down here, Mike Parker, I said, why is my name on the board? He was like, Rhys, we need to have a chat. Oh, okay, where's this going to go? So he sat down with me afterwards and said, we are a relatively new team down in Kent and Southeast. So he said, you add up all of our experience within Sisk, and it doesn't come to the experience you've got, so we kind of like you to stay on, but stay on in more of a supporting role. So obviously bring people up to scratch with regards to Sisk Rail policy, how we do things, and just be there as a general support for the guys on site. But then since becoming an I Am Pure ambassador, and obviously knowing all the things surrounding mental health, it's kind of given me the opportunity to take my supporting role with the lads down there further. And actually, I find myself now being more of an agony uncle, if that makes sense, and kind of, I mean, people tend to tell me, obviously everything's confidential, but people tend to tell me everything. And it's not kind of like within my role necessarily as an ambassador, where I can actually properly help them and actually, signpost them to what they need. But sometimes people just want to vent. So I see myself as a bit of a go-between between higher management and the guys on the ground. It's I tend to try and sort things out before it needs to be escalated. Rail is a 24/7 industry. You know, it's not normally within construction sites. They work Monday to Friday. Weekend work is quite minimal. It does go on, but it's not always the case. In railway, it is literally 24/7. We actually tend to work when trains are not running. So there's a lot of nighttime work, there's a lot of weekend work, there's a lot of weekend possessions, and in my experience, that's hard. That is hard, and it certainly doesn't suit everybody. I know that there are several people within the team which do struggle with that, and that's why it's so important to kind of keep that connection open. Let them know that I am actually here for them.
Obviously, people have all sorts of things they want to vent about or are concerned about. But are there sort of common things that you find are quite prevalent when it comes to concerns, issues, well-being challenges?
I mean, as far as the number one issue specifically within rail is quite often, especially during projects, we can find ourselves working away from home, sometimes for weeks or months at a time. And from personal experience, that is a very lonely time. You feel isolated. You do feel not necessarily that people are not there for you, but because you haven't got that connection to people who you work with on your team on a day-to-day basis, it's definitely a very lonely time. And that's probably put me, because I've been there myself, I can totally understand where people are coming from and what people are going through, which is why I do tend to probably touch base with the site teams more often than potentially other parts of the business, because I can personally understand I know exactly what it's like. I mean, I can tell you about one job I was on. I was up in Harlech, and I was on a job up there, and I was actually only home for 1.5 days a fortnight. A typical thing would be traveling up early hours on a Monday morning, leaving my house at 4 a.m., spending 2 weeks, including obviously that weekend, then traveling back on a Friday. If I needed to leave by 11 o'clock in the morning, if I left after 12 or 1, it could take me 7 hours to get home. And so I would find myself home on a Friday night, being quite tired, as you can imagine, not being any good to my family, my wife and my children on the Friday night. Saturday would be kind of like a semi-normal day, chilling with my family, and then Sunday I'd be getting ready to go back up. It wasn't a very good place to be, and even though I managed to cope with it, it was a major struggle, especially with my marriage concerned. We came pretty close. My wife Lorraine was near enough living a single mother's life, which was difficult. Luckily enough, at the moment, I've got a pretty good work-life balance. I've got a line manager which is superb, and he understands that the importance of things outside of work as well. So I find myself only having to work away 50% of the time. So it's pretty good. It hasn't happened quite yet, but if somebody approached me with a similar situation as I had, where my marriage was possibly about to end, then with their permission, and only with their permission, I wouldn't have any issue going to their line manager and having a discussion whether or not we could actually change their work pattern, or spread the workload, or things like that. And to be honest with you, Sisk, I mean, I've worked for various companies throughout the years, and Sisk are very good at ensuring a work-life balance. They tend to listen to people.
Aside from then the time away from home, what other things, I think we spoke before about incidents on the track. Is that something that's quite common and something that you find coming across your desk quite regularly?
Well, I mean, not only have we got to look out for our staff, but as you mentioned, we do come in contact with the public, especially on station platforms. Recently, we had a member of the public who was going to take his own life by jumping in front of a train. But one of our site managers, Mike, intervened and prevented it. He stayed with him, kept him calm until the emergency services turned up and took over. And as part of my role, I would then go out, speak to everybody involved, offer support, obviously show them different routes to help we have, signpost them either to our EAP, or if they are outside of our organization, which quite often we're pretty much a management company, so most of our guys on site are subcontractors. And even though they haven't got access to our LifeWorks EAP, there is help out there. They have the construction industry helpline, which is done by the Lighthouse Club, which offer a brilliant, they're fantastic. And that's something we're trying to push actually within our well-being, is to see what support networks are out there for people outside of our organisation.
Both Rhys Watkins and Ross Cullen are master problem solvers in their own roles, which is why they have been trusted with positions of responsibility to do what they do best. And a little later in the episode, they will be describing why they are so passionate about their jobs and what it is that makes them so good at them. But during our conversation, both Ross and Rhys talked a lot about the people in their personal and professional lives that have helped shape who they are today. But in each case, there was one person that had a particular influence on them. For Rhys, it was his sister, and for Ross, it was Otto Thorup, Ross's predecessor in the role of Group Chief Engineer at Sisk. When Ross first joined the company, Otto was appointed as his mentor, and Ross was given a very simple brief.
So I was just to shadow and learn. That was my brief, basically, and that I certainly did with Otto, because he would just give me tasks to do that I just was way out of my depth with, and he would just go figure it out. Yeah. He was the type of leader that would let you make your mistakes in a safe way. It might not be the best solution, but then he'd send you down to the site to follow the solution. And then you get it in the ear from the foreman at the carpenter going, who the hell designed this? This is unbuildable. Yeah. And that's how you learn. We would sit down in his office for hours, and he'd pull out the photographs of all the projects he worked on in Australia and across the world. And you didn't get, this is what we did. You got, this guy was Tim. Tim had 2 kids that were in school, and he worked on the site. And you got the background story of the people in the photograph and what they did, and the relationships between all the members in the team, and you got the engineering story in the background of what the solution was. So that was, I learned a lot through that, but it was also engaging because it was interesting, because you were getting a soap opera unfolding in a story about a solution to a problem they had. So look, I think communicating things through visual, through stories, through experiences, and it's not just about this is the problem, this is the solution. It's this is the problem, these are the people in the team, this is how we worked together to achieve it. And I suppose you can make it a bit interesting. That works on so many levels for so many different people. It's a good way to share knowledge and get people on the same page, I guess. It certainly worked for me, and it makes it enjoyable.
What kind of person was he? What was his personality like?
Genuine. Very genuine. He liked to see the funny side of things. He liked to get things done as well. He liked to tell a story. He liked to pass on his knowledge, which was good. He was quite philosophical. He sat me down and he said, you can work all the time you want, but you need to enjoy yourself. So you need to not work. Don't work late, don't work weekends, unless you want to work late or work weekends. But enjoy your life, do the things you want to do, work hard and work, and get the most out of it, but enjoy it. And that was his philosophy. He loved what he did, and a lot of that rubbed off on me. I love what I do as well, because we're there to help people to solve problems, to come up with good ideas. Sometimes they're not the best ideas we come up with, but they're an idea and they get the job moving. So yeah, it's definitely really rewarding. But one of the things he really taught me was to be able to touch and feel engineering and problems. So nothing was a pressure. It's not 15 kPa loading. It is, well, what is it? Is it, what's the weight? Is it a ton of sand sitting on the ground? Is it, you had to realize what the problem was, or convert it back to how many cars is that in weight over what sort of area. So it's really, what do the numbers mean? Put it back into context. So everything is put into context, and so you strip everything back down to the bare basics, understand the problem, and then figure out, and then work back through the codes and the numbers and the pressures and the rules, I suppose.
Yeah. Is Otto, is he still with us, or?
No, unfortunately, Otto passed away in 2016. So I moved back from London the end of 2015. So yeah, they're big shoes to fill, and hopefully some weighs on my mind quite a bit. It's what would Otto do in this scenario? So when you're challenged with a problem, you're because the office I'm in is his office, and to me it's always his office, and a lot of the books I have in the office are actually Otto's reference books. But it always weighs on me out. How would he deal with the problem?
Has there been, or is there still, a little bit of a process where it's, you more and more you have to say, well, what would Ross do rather than what would Otto do?
Yeah, well, I think I've always had my own style, but it's always good to chat your problems through with others, and I've got a great team around me now, and I suppose the chats I would have had with Otto, I now have with Gary and Jose and Antonio, and we shoot the breeze on the solutions. And the guys on the team would always challenge me as to, why am I doing it that way? Why not do it this way? And that's part of it. I do the same with them.
Yeah, my first experience with issues surrounding mental health came at a very young age, really. My father passed away when I was 13 years old. I have an older brother who was 16 at the time, and my younger sister who was 9. Now, mental health wasn't really talked about then, but I realised when I was older exactly what our family was going through at the time, especially with bits of depression and things surrounding that. But it particularly hit my sister hard, and she experienced anxiety, depression for the rest of her life, really, since that. She at the time, not at the time, but she not long after that took to drink as a way of escaping. And due to complications surrounding this terrible disease of alcoholism, her life ended 2 months ago, which was, as you can imagine, quite a difficult time.
Very sorry.
That's fine. She basically developed an infection, which was not related, but with her drinking, she had weakened her liver and her kidneys, which kind of put extra pressure on her system when she developed an infection. And unfortunately, they gave up, and she suffered complete organ failure, because once one organ shuts down, that's what kind of happens. Not a great time, to be honest with you. But, obviously with anything kind of negative, there's always some kind of small silver lining. And I've taken that negativity into a positive, and I'm in the process of setting up a charity in her name. It's going to be called the Catherine Elizabeth Foundation, and it will support bereaved children who have lost a parent, which is, as you can imagine, would have been very close to her heart, as well as the rest of the family. So even though it was devastating what happened to her, it yeah, there's silver lining of it. But that's kind of like who I am. I know it sounds a bit strange, but with everything which, every negative aspect which have been hit at me, or everything thrown at me, I've always kind of like used that to kind of flip it around and look at the positive side of stuff. And, I think that has put me in a better position to be able to help out others, because I've experienced quite a lot of what other people could potentially be going through.
So we have heard from Rhys and Ross about the roles they do, the projects that have allowed their skills to shine through, and the people that have influenced them the most. But what about the personal qualities and characteristics that lie at the heart of what they do, and the fulfillment they get from solving problems and creating solutions? Let's go back to Rhys.
I think fundamentally it's about trust. It's knowing that whatever they tell me stays with me. I'm not I'm not an office gossip. I'm not one to talk behind people's backs. Confidentiality is absolutely paramount. Whether it be something, a flippant remark about venting about something, or whether or not it goes further and they actually need to actually have a help and support from our EAP. They know they can trust me. Fulfilling for me, obviously we know that stress levels are through the roof regards to the construction industry. But for me, fulfillment is seeing sites happy, seeing people happy, seeing people enjoy, seeing our workforce enjoying going to work. There was one occasion where somebody, even though they wasn't actually thinking of suicide at the time, they were so stressed and depressed with something that they were in a very, very dangerous hole. And getting them that help really kind of, it changes you every single time you help somebody. Just to hear, thank you, thanks for that, it is enough. I mean, I'm so privileged to be in the position I am at the moment, to be able to help those people. At the end of the day, we're all in it together. We should all be helping each other.
I don't give up. And nothing is unsolvable. That's the way I am. If someone says it can't be done, by God, it can be. And that's probably the most motivating thing anyone could ever say to me.
Yeah. Do you have to have a certain kind of mindset to be an engineer?
Yes and no. But a good background in science and maths and strong logic reasoning would be the foundation blocks for engineering. But saying that, we need engineers that have a lot of other skills and broader skills as well as those kind of core skills. So if we want to be visionaries, we need to have the same skill set as a visionary, but have the logic to back it up. Because if you think like an engineer, you might not innovate because you have a strong background in logic, so it's all black and white. But you need to have the vision to be able to, turn things upside down and try it a different way and follow logic to back it up. Yeah, well, you do get some sleepless nights sometimes with the solutions we come up with, but that's what I love about engineering. It's like it's engaging me all the time. That's what gets me up out of bed in the morning, knowing that there's a problem to be solved. How are you going to do it? I find I do my best thinking when I'm probably asleep. And other times you're sitting at your desk and you're kind of, looking at the ceiling and thinking, people must look into me in my office and wonder, do I do any work? But I know I am. I'm thinking. And, it takes time to come up with the solutions and you bounce them around, you talk to people, you get their inputs and you take everyone's ideas and then you start to stick them together and you get solutions from that. So look, we learn from everyone. I find I learn an awful lot from the fitters, from the carpenters. When you get out to site and you talk to them and you really understand how they want to solve things, you get into their frame of mind. They have so much skill, they have a life of skill, and I only am touching it. So by talking to them, you get their ideas, and that informs you. And you take a little bit from everyone, and that's how you develop good solutions, by involving everyone else.
That's interesting, because I think perhaps a lot of people might have a perception that it's a highly scientific, highly logical job, and of course there's a huge element of that. But from what you're saying, creativity and communication seem to be just as important a part.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's no point in developing a solution that no one wants to build. You know, you have to get them you have to get everyone on the same page. So yeah. Sometimes we tailor the solution based on what people want. So, you know, when I worked in London on Crossrail, we had a team of fitters, and they were long in the game, but they did it because they loved it. So there was a chap, Danny Doherty, he was a Donegal man living in Naas, working in London, tunnelling all his life. And if you drew something on a piece of paper that he didn't agree with, he'd march up to the office and let you know about it, which was great, you know, because he told me his views, and he goes, you know, this is how you do it. And he's got a lifetime of experience, and he goes, this is why we don't weld it this way, because it's too uncomfortable for the welder to get into position to do the weld. So if he does it, it's not going to be a good weld. Why don't you do it this way? So that's the type of engagement that we like. And plus, we're being challenged, which is good. You always need to be challenged. Make sure that we're delivering, you know, to the best we can, and using the skills of the people that we have.
As you listen to the rest of this series of Inside Sisk, it will become very clear that problem solving, to some degree or other, lies at the core of every role within the company. And it is the desire to come up with creative solutions time and time again that make people great at what they do on a consistent basis. But what's even more important is that those same people feel like they belong, that they are supported and listened to, and that those they work with are always willing to help them solve a problem that they might be going through. It is only then that we can really perform at our best. Thanks to Ross Cullen and Rhys Watkins for sharing their stories in this episode of Inside Sisk. Thank you for listening. If you are enjoying the series so far, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts and follow the series on Spotify. And I hope you can join us for the next episode of Inside Sisk.